Hi everyone, my name is Nick Martin and I'm a student in the Interactive Design and Marketing program at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. This video presentation is for my digital marketing principles final, and it's a showcase of the digital marketing campaign that I created for Fancy Tiger Clothing in Denver, Colorado. I myself have been a longtime customer of Fancy Tiger, and I purchase a lot of my clothes there just because it's a really great store with some great staff and some really cool, unique stuff. The reason I chose to do a campaign for Fancy Tiger is, after studying a number of digital marketing techniques in this class, I was surprised to find that a young contemporary organization like Fancy Tiger really wasn't using any of them. It seemed kind of shocking that they weren't really engaging their market, at least in a digital environment. I mean, the majority of their market, being a young crowd, I feel like primarily consists of digital natives and immigrants, so it was kind of surprising to see a lack of communication on that front. So I thought for my capstone project, I would create a campaign for Fancy Tiger that would better leverage those digital spaces while also maintaining who Fancy Tiger is as an organization. I'd like to make it clear that the purpose of this campaign was in no way intended to begin converting Fancy Tiger into a digital brand, complete with a large e-store presence or anything like that. Rather, the idea was to leverage digital tools to support their existing framework and their goals. What goals, really? So while the things like sales are important, of course, in order to sustain the business, like any business, I think their principal interests really lie in being part of a vibrant urban community, hence their location in a young, artistic, active inner-city neighborhood. While Fancy Tiger does have something of an e-commerce presence, it contains a pretty limited selection of products. Most of what they sell is only available in their brick-and-mortar locations, meaning that conversions are almost exclusively done in-store. And that's really where this campaign comes in. What I intended to do was utilize current digital tools to aid in that existing in-store conversion process. Again, the focus was not to push the brand more towards e-commerce, but rather to engage people active in the digital community in order to cultivate a greater interest in Fancy Tiger and really what they're all about, which is what? So, I see Fancy Tiger as a boutique purveyor of fine threads, of course, but they're really so much more than that. Every time I've been in the store, I feel like my relationship with the staff there only grows deeper, and not in a return business slash favored customer kind of way, but a genuine, it's great to see you again, what have you been up to kind of way. The staff here are not only incredibly friendly and helpful, but human, and really interested in making friendly connections with their clientele. And I think that's part of what drives their belief in contributing to a tight-knit local community, and thus using the store to facilitate those connections. So as you can kind of see, this is just a look at their website here, which is a pretty straightforward single page sort of site. Has information about where the store is located, hours of operation, a link to their online store, which looks like this pretty much. Kind of as I mentioned, their selection of products is really pretty limited compared to what they have in the store, which primarily makes them a brick and mortar operation. They've got a Facebook page with posts of the staff wearing clothes. And that's kind of it. They talk about who their local artists are, maybe some event announcements, which I think there's one down here. So some local, some flasks here that are pretty cool. I could have sworn there was an event somewhere down here. Anyways, oh, there it is. So event announcement and stuff like that. They've got an Instagram account that, is really kind of just they're using it for the same reason they use their Facebook page. It's really the same posts, the same photos, as you can see. So I think there's a lot more potential there with those social media accounts and so on. So that being said, they're not, completely digitally averse by any means. They do have a Facebook and Instagram presence, but they're really not taking full advantage of those tools, to give them greater outreach, both to their already established personas as well as additional markets. I think at their core, Fancy Tiger is clearly committed to cultivating a strong community of friends, fashion-forward individuals. They encompass an identity that's built on face-to-face interaction, which is really pretty great because they're essentially embracing what the internet community is often criticized as being void of, and that's true, genuine connection. That being said, the digital and these physical and digital realms needn't necessarily be exclusive of one another, I think, in order for Fancy Tiger to maintain its preferred model. Instead, these digital spaces can be used to support that model. So I'll use that as a segue to my actual content pieces. The first of which I created was sort of a mock-up of an email campaign for Fancy Tiger. It's more or less a straightforward, standard campaign. While I was designing it, and this is true for the other content pieces as well, it was important to be consistent with Fancy Tiger's voice aesthetic, which is why I did my best to emulate many of the design elements found on their website, using similar typographic styles, liberal amounts of white space, kind of a minimalist approach, very simple, very easy. While I was brainstorming content for this email campaign, I wanted to be sure it included a handful of critical items, the objectives of which would be to A, physically draw people to the store, B, provide a deeper look at Fancy Tiger and the products that they carry, and C, as well as build community relations by providing a shout out to a local separate establishment. The first part of the campaign is the announcement of a hot sale, and this is for men's leather jackets that were 75% off. This was a real life sale that I actually took advantage of. Screaming deal on a great jacket. It was awesome. But I chose to do this first because I think amongst everything that's in the campaign, this offered the most direct benefit to a potential customer, and would probably be the most likely to generate a conversion. Next was to highlight a local artist whose products they're currently carrying. The digital community is always hungry for content, and I feel like having a deeper story behind those products, as well as a local artist who made them, increases the chances of conversions and ultimately contributing to that local artist community. It's kind of the idea. Right after that, I decided to have a link to Fancy Tiger's design submission form, and I thought a good place to have this would be right after the artist showcase, just in the event that any other local artists who were potentially reading this would say, hey, I've got some stuff I want to get in the store, and they could jump to that form through that submit your design button. Next is a link to their e-commerce site, which has a promotional code. It's pretty straightforward e-commerce kind of stuff here. I then included a link to a staff interview. This was a real interview that happened in a local publication back in 2013, but this is kind of the idea, an example of the type of content you would have here in this campaign. Maybe these articles, would either be in external news sources or they would be on the site itself, but essentially it's a good way to get a deeper sense of who they are as an organization. So just in the effort of greater transparency and things like that. And lastly, in support of that local independent community building effort, I thought it was appropriate to give a shout out to another local establishment. In this case, it's a coffee shop that really does have the most phenomenal mocha ever. Not even kidding, super delicious. But by including that, it just shows a commitment that Fancy Tiger is still just interested more in that community than they are about their personal business. So I thought that was a fun bit to include. So that's it for my campaign. The next piece of content that I created for my marketing campaign was a blog post. Kind of like I mentioned with the artist highlight from the email campaign, the digital community is always hungry for content. Everybody knows that. It's a major, if not the primary driver of the internet as a whole. And that's where this blog post comes in. The point of this post is to showcase a new product that the store is carrying called the Power Shirt here. But more than that, it's meant to tell the story behind the product, the context in which the product was made. In this case, to support the fight for women's rights. When you visit the e-store page that contains details of the shirt, where you can purchase it, you can see that Fancy Tiger, if you scroll down here, you can see, okay, for each t-shirt purchased, Fancy Tiger Clothing will donate $20 to ColorLatina.org, a Denver-based nonprofit group dedicated to the health and education of Latinas and their families. And they do provide a link to the organization itself, which is really great. But I thought it would be nice to have more information on what this shirt is about, what communities they're making contributions to on the Fancy Tiger side of things, their own content that, they have. And that's where this blog post comes in. Obviously, a post like this would most likely be accessed, either through an email campaign or through social media, or so on. But kind of the idea is that, this content would draw people to the store, but potentially to the organizations like Color themselves, which would be pretty great. Yeah, overall, this blog post gives us a deeper look at Fancy Tiger's social responsibility efforts, and that's a pretty huge win in this day and age, which I think is great. As for the page itself, it's pretty basic. I didn't get a chance to make it as responsive as I would have liked, which of course is absolutely critical in any kind of digital marketing these days. But that'd be a pretty easy fix. If anything, just adjust some font sizes to make it more mobile friendly. The last piece of content that I developed for Fancy Tiger was a direct mailer. And this was probably my favorite piece of content, not really because of the design or anything, which again I tried to make consistent with Fancy Tiger's voice and their aesthetic, but really what this content piece intends to facilitate. It's an invitation, as you can see, to a private social event at the store, which they already do anyways. An event that is for top digital influencers in the fashion community. The idea is that Fancy Tiger would invite local fashionistas with a strong digital presence and following, and just essentially throw a big party for them. Drinks, music, conversation, speeches, and of course, free stuff. I know a number of organizations do events like these, and I think it's pretty brilliant for a couple of reasons. Reasons that fit Fancy Tiger's objectives really well. One, they have the opportunity to build deeper connections with their community. By inviting writers with a strong following, they're making, connections with those writers themselves, which, is in line with really their goals to begin with. Two, when those writers turn around and write about the event or perhaps products that they received at the event, they are essentially doing Fancy Tiger's marketing for them. Those influencers already have a loyal following, and when Fancy Tiger makes the effort to connect with one influencer in particular who can already reach that established market, it's way easier than trying to reach those people on their own. And that's why I kind of feel like this piece of content is a synthesis of who Fancy Tiger is, which is a store focused on building a community through face-to-face interaction, but also the digital tools that they could leverage to work towards building that community. Plus, they get to have a party in the process. So there's that too, which is pretty great. And that's it. I mean, if I had the time and resources to do an additional content piece, and obviously I think this would happen in a real life scenario, I would like to do video content, more video type stuff. And what I'm thinking would be great, or at least an example of some kind of video content, would be something like a video interview with a local artist in their creative space, whether that's a full-blown studio or a corner of their apartment. I think the opportunity to get really close and personal with the artists that they carry products for, would again only build stronger ties to the community, but it would also, it'd be in line with satisfying the online community's thirst for content, and video, of course, is the preferred medium for that over, say, like a blog post or something like that. So that'd be pretty cool. Obviously something I would do in a real life scenario, or potentially pursue. But I really enjoyed creating these pieces of content for my digital marketing campaign. I was able to learn a lot and put into practice many of the concepts that were covered throughout this course. I feel confident that if this were a real life marketing initiative for Fancy Tiger, I think it would be pretty successful, or at least a great base to start from that could later be adjusted for optimization. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you live in Denver or you're visiting in the future, do stop by Fancy Tiger Clothing, because they're a pretty cool bunch of people, and yeah, they've got some great stuff. Thanks so much.